Welcome to the Teacher Thoughts Podcast. I'm your host, Abby Hernandez. Teacher thoughts can be groundbreaking. Teacher thoughts can be tiring. And the good news is, teacher thoughts can be changed. I don't claim to be a mental health expert. I'm just an educator, and I'll be using this space to synthesize what I have learned from my self-help research in a way that will help you. Welcome to episode 4 of the Teacher Thoughts Podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today about the lies your brain is telling you through cognitive distortions. When I learned about this, it was a total game changer and completely helped me to understand my brain in a much deeper, clearer way. So when you think of the word drama or drama queen, what comes to mind? For me, it's the movie Mean Girls. I think of these girls who are probably in middle school or high school and think they're better than everyone else and start talking and spreading gossip about them and are just like exaggerating all the time and like flicking their hair. And I've never really identified with that. Like, I would not consider myself to be a drama queen in that sense in any way. But through my therapy and my self-help research and all of that, I have determined that my brain is actually the biggest drama queen that I know. While I might not feel like I identify as a drama queen, so much drama is going on in my head all the time. And when my brain does that, it blows things out of proportion. Can't talk. Blows things out of proportion, tells me partial truths, and then it's all totally unnecessary. It's unhelpful. It never improves my unpleasant circumstances, and it just exaggerates or exacerbates what I'm going through. So the reason I want to share with you what I've learned about cognitive distortions is because I believe as teachers, all we need is knowledge, and we can figure out the rest. What I mean by this is like, we're super resourceful, right? We have teachers out there creating entire curriculums because their districts aren't giving them what they need. Look at Teachers Pay Teachers, for goodness sakes. Like, teachers creating amazing resources because since the textbooks went out the window, it's like, I want you to teach this, but we don't really get anything that we need to actually teach. But teachers aren't really complaining about that on a daily basis. Teachers are doing the work that we need to do to find the solutions for our students and making massive change. But when it comes to ourselves, we're often not making massive change. We're going through the motions. And I'm not sure exactly why this is. I think it's probably different for different people. For some people, we just don't prioritize ourselves. We don't feel like we have time to prioritize ourselves between our family and our school and maybe our second jobs. We don't have time, or we don't make time for ourselves. So to make the shift in how our brains think to give us more positive results, I think the most important thing that we can do is just learn a little bit of information about how and why our brain is doing what it's doing. So the psychiatrists and psychologists of the world have done this work for us, thankfully. And it all started with Dr. Aaron Beck, who's the person who invented cognitive behavior therapy. And he came up with a concept of cognitive distortions. So he looked at tons and tons and tons of people who were thinking tons and tons and tons of negative thoughts. And he was able to find lots of commonalities between them. So he categorized all of these negative thoughts and gave each of them a name. And all of them are called, as a whole group, are called cognitive distortions. But each different type of negative thinking pattern has its own little name, which I think is totally cool, because whenever I found out about this, it's like, whoa, there were enough people thinking these same things that they could label it and give it a name and a little short description so that we can figure out what it is exactly that our brains are doing and how they're trying to lie to us and trick us. So the first thing I want to say is whenever I think of distortion, the thing that comes to mind is those like really weird mirrors that you would see at like a carnival or a fair or I don't know, maybe like Disney World or something, where you walk up to the mirror and they have like 10 different mirrors in a row and each mirror makes you look different in some way. Like some of them stretch you out and make you taller and some of them make you shorter, and what they're doing is they're distorting your image. They're making it look different than you actually look to the people around you, right? So this is what essentially cognitive distortions are. They're how our brain is tricking us to see our circumstance in a different way. So another version of that is like Snapchat filters, right? So we can take a picture of our face or hold the phone in front of our face and it will distort or create like the one that has the wide teeth or the big eyes, it's distorting our face and changing our actual circumstance or what we actually look like and making it just a little bit different. So I want you to sort of think as I talk through these cognitive distortions as different like Snapchat filters for our thoughts, basically. As I read through these cognitive distortions, I want you to ask yourself, do I do this? Do I ever do this? And I'm going to go through them pretty quickly because of time. So if you need to stop or go back or maybe even listen to this episode over again, it might take that for you to completely internalize this because this is a lot of information. So I'm going to go through and give some examples of 10 different types of cognitive distortions. And if you're like me, I think I have had all of these thought patterns, all of these negative thoughts at some point in time. So here we go. The first type of cognitive distortion I already mentioned in episode 1. It's called all or nothing thinking. This is when people think in black and white. For example, if I'm not perfect enough, I have failed, or I either do it all right or not at all. So this is the example that I gave about like letting grading papers or papers that need to be graded build up. Because I need to be able to do all of them right, or I'm going to do none of them at all. The second type of cognitive distortion is called overgeneralizing. So you see a pattern based on one single event, or you're overly broad in the conclusions that we draw. So you could say things, if you overgeneralize, you might use words like everything and always, or nothing, or never. Another type of cognitive distortion is a mental filter. This is only paying attention to certain types of evidence. So like we don't notice our failures, we notice our failures, but we don't see our successes. So in a mental filter, you may be doing lots of things right, but you are only internalizing the things that you're doing wrong. So you're not giving yourself credit really. I guess this kind of goes along with the next one, which is disqualifying the positive. So this means that you do good things, but you think they don't count. So you're just like, oh yeah, I did this good thing, but I'm really just awful. Okay, so you just take those, it's like nothing good that you do actually counts. Another thing that I know I do all the time is jump to conclusions. So this is when you put thoughts or words into other people's mouths when they haven't actually said them. So 2 areas that you might jump to conclusions are you could do mind reading, like you just think you know what other people think, either about you or whatever, and you don't actually know. You just assume that you know. And then you decide how you're going to think about yourself based on what you think that they think about you, which none of that may actually be true. And another way that we jump to conclusions is we try to predict the future. And so we might think that things are going to turn out bad, so we don't even try because we just already know that it's going to be bad. Okay, number 6, magnification or catastrophizing and minimization. So this is an example of like exaggerating or blowing things out of proportion, thinking that things are automatically just awful, horrible, or inappropriately shrinking something to make it seem less important. So usually things that are bad, we would magnify, and then things that are good, we would minimize if we were having these negative thought patterns. So like, you find out a student in your class has the coronavirus. If you were magnifying that issue, you would be like, oh my gosh, we're all going to get it. We're all going to have to quarantine. All of my plans are going to go out the window. What if I give this to my family members? And you automatically, like, even though those are all valid things, but in your mind, they're basically all happening already. You've got it. You're going to get everyone sick in your household, everyone else, even though it was just one person in your classroom. So magnifying is just totally blowing things out of proportion. Emotional reasoning. This is assuming that because we feel a certain way, it must be true. I feel this way. I feel embarrassed, so I must be an idiot. That's one example. So this emotional reasoning really means that we're looking at our feelings from day to day that fluctuate and go up and down to determine who we are as a human being. And if we live in a space of emotional reasoning where we let our thoughts determine our worth, our feelings, determine our worth, we're probably not going to have a very high self-concept. So realizing that it is our thoughts that create our feelings, not just like who we are that creates our feelings, is going to be really helpful in doing this thought work and making positive change in your life. The next one I'm going to be able to go through very quickly because it's just should or must statements. And my last episode was all about this. Go back and listen to episode 3 if you'd like more information about how shoulds are really counterproductive and you should not, listen to me. It is unbeneficial for you to use them as part of your vocabulary. Okay. Unbeneficial, is that even a word? I'm not sure. Labeling. Assigning labels to ourself or other people. This is like saying, I am a loser. I am useless. They are idiots. I hear some people in my life say this aloud a lot. And it makes me very uncomfortable to hear people insult themselves in my presence. And I try to say things like, hey, don't make fun of my friend. But when people practice labeling and self-labeling, it's a very hard habit to break. And I'm going to guess that lots of you may not say these things aloud, but you tell yourself these insults inside your own head often. So when you go to start labeling yourself, knowing who you are at your core and knowing that you are super valuable and that you have inherent worth is going to be super important. So when you hear yourself start to call yourself negative things or insult yourself, you can tell yourself, hey, stop making fun of my friend. I love this person. You are not allowed. I will not allow you to talk to me in this way because your brain is going to do what your brain wants unless you intervene. So labeling is a super, super negative thought process that can lead you to think that that's who you are at your core, that you are a loser, that you are not good enough. And breaking that thought cycle is going to be super important. Okay, and then another thing is the very last cognitive distortion is called personalization. So this means you blame yourself or you take responsibility for something that was not your fault. Or you blame other people for something that was your fault. So how many times a day do you tell yourself something was your fault? Okay. We don't want to go to the opposite extreme, right? And think that we don't have any effect over our lives and like everything happens to us and we are victims of our circumstances. But when you put unnecessary responsibility and guilt on yourself, that's super not helpful. So I'm not sure this was like the best depiction of all of these thinking styles, but if you go on Google, a quick search of the words cognitive distortions, and if you pull up the images, There are lots of little icons and illustrations and infographics that can help you really to internalize this information. I know for a fact I've done all of these at some point in time. And I want to give you a little disclaimer here that, like, if these thoughts are so pervasive and you identify with lots of different types of cognitive distortions that I mentioned, only working on thought work on your own is probably not going to be enough. Okay, because cognitive distortions were developed by psychologists and psychiatrists, and lots of these distortions can be sort of like a clue that there's some underlying disorder. If this is the way that your brain functions like 90% of the time, getting some type of help from a medical or mental health professional is probably going to be super important. So like therapy or medication, all of those things can help to decrease the frequency of your cognitive distortions so that you can then on your own do the rest of the work. So I don't think therapy or medication would either automatically take them away. But as I say, I'm not a medical professional, but in my own experience, both of these things have helped me to get to a point of stability so that I could actually look at my thoughts and start to process them. So if that is going to be part of your journey and you've realized that, like, whoa, I have lots of distortions going on in my brain, like this is how I function 90% of the time, I want to wish you the best of luck in the journey, figuring out what it is exactly that your brain needs. But one thing I want to tell you is that there are things that you can start doing today. There are things that you can start doing now to help stop the cycle of these negative emotions that take a plague on us and cause us to just feel awful. So the first thing that we can do is recognize our thoughts and name them. So figuring out which type of cognitive distortion we have going on in our brain and call it out. So you can say, oh my goodness, I can't believe that was just a should statement. That doesn't belong in my brain. I'm going to try to reframe that and think something else. Or, wow, I just had a really good lesson. And in my observation, I did get some negative feedback, but I'm focusing in on that and I'm disqualifying all of the positive things that it says in my feedback and just focusing on the negative. That's super unhelpful. Or did I seriously call myself an idiot? That's not who I am at my core. I am a worthy human being who is doing some amazing work and has a lot on my plate right now. So I'm going to show myself some grace instead of calling myself unhelpful names. So when you do this and you start to recognize, knowing the problem or calling it out is the first step to real change. So the second thing that you need to do, or that you could do that might be beneficial to you, is show yourself some compassion, just like you would with a friend. Like, wow, my brain just totally tried to trick me. I have been thinking this way for a really long time. So many other brains do this that they've come up with names for these types of thinking patterns, and I am totally not alone. I'm here to help you. Just tell yourself, I am here to support you. This is not helpful, and we're going to find a way to fix it. So then you can practice self-coaching. So this is interrupting that thought and trying to choose another thought instead. So realizing, what results am I having? What actions am I doing to cause this result? What feelings are causing my actions, and what thoughts am I having? And so then you just decide what you want your new result to be and start working on changing those thoughts to thoughts that will serve you. This has been a lot. And I hope that finding out that cognitive distortions exist, if you didn't already know about them, has been eye-opening to you. It was eye-opening to me, and it totally called me out. Like when I started reading these on the computer, I was like, who just looked inside my brain? Like, how did you know that I was thinking those things? I felt totally exposed. I really wish you the best of luck in figuring out what your brain is thinking and helping to interrupt these thought patterns. As teachers, I know that you have what it takes to do this work. I am 100% confident that when you have the knowledge that you need, you are able to do the work to figure out solutions that will work for you, just like you find solutions that will work for your students. Come back next time for an episode on controlling COVID.